before the commission and explain, their issues, and if they're having problems, what they might be. So we are going to have those folks in at the next meeting. We have Abby Course with us, just jumped on, and good morning and welcome, Abby. Abby's an organic farmer, and so we'll see how the milk price, as far as I know, has been fairly steady the last few months, and but I also heard that the milk payment program has kicked in, and so you folks that are on this morning, it would be good if you could someplace during your testimony tell us a little bit about the price of milk and how that has helped, or if it stabilized things on the farm at all. What you think about an a state over order premium, as well as if you did receive notice that you're gonna, and you did sign up for the it was MLC program, the insurance program, how that maybe affects your in price. Dan, maybe Linda, maybe we should get is this thing going to go live?
It is live.
It is live. Okay. Dan, did you have anything that you'd like to say for opening remarks?
Thanks, Bobby. I think you covered what we're hoping to hear today. You said MILC. I think you meant the Dairy Margin Coverage Program.
DMC.
Yep. So yeah, the combination of how the regulated market and the government program has worked, and also how in the middle premiums, what the premium component of your pricing structure looks like. I just on my end, I apologize for not being there today. Long before we rescheduled this meeting, I scheduled myself into something later in the morning that I totally forgot about. So, and I couldn't get out of. So I'll be here for the first part of the meeting. And Bobby, as always, will run the meeting in his wonderful way.
Thank you, Dan. Randy, Senator Brock is here in the room with me. Yeah, you can see us up there. Did you have anything, Randy?
No, I think we've got a long day's work ahead of us, and so we might as well get on with it.
Yeah, and I believe that unless someone has to get off at a given time, we'll try to go according to the schedule, which you folks should all have a copy of. Is Jackie, did you had your hand up?
Yeah, thank you, Bobby. I just wanted a little clarification, and probably it's coming from Dan. The letter that was sent out to the farmers with their asking for what we're going to hear today, was that sent out to the task force? Because I didn't find it, and I guess in the future, I would like to know what our witnesses are going to be asked, just so I'm up on the questions. So that was all my comments. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think Linda put that together, I believe, right?
I didn't send it till this morning, Jackie. My apologies. I sent it with your Zoom invite this morning.
Okay, thank you.
And are there any other comments from any of the task force members before we get right into it with our witnesses? If Not, we'll start with Joanna. You're first on my list, and could you give us a little intro and then your testimony?
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Bobby. Hopefully everybody can hear me okay. Excuse me, I'm Joanna Lidback. My husband and I, Adam Lidback, we have the farm at Wheeler Mountain, and we're actually located in Westmore. I've got a picture of one of my our pastures in the background. We have about 80 cows, both Holsteins and Jerseys, and also Hojos, which are Holstein Jersey crosses, which I've come to love. Anyway, and we graze during the temperate months, which includes part of November now, apparently, which is exciting up here in the Northeast Kingdom. We also do some small side things. We have some beef for local beef sales. We sell a composted cow manure, and I have a job off the farm. I've also started a small consulting firm, and I have about a dozen clients. I also work for a large dairy over in Northern New York, Adirondack Farms. I'm their CFO. So I've got a strong background in numbers and dairy economics. So I did put together some comments, and I'll just read through them if that's okay with you. Thank you for inviting me to share my experience and perspective with you. I wanted to make a small comment. I see that you have us segmented into small, medium, and large farms. And I just think it should be said that many of our needs are the same. Sure, our business models are different, but the underlying pressures are similar in what we are all facing. In terms of the needs for marketing our milk, we need to the opportunity to explore and grow new markets. And those underlying, general economic conditions, I think we have the saying, which is used in several industries, but a rising tide lifts all boats. And that is very true in the dairy industry as well. I also, and I'm sure Abby will mention this to some degree, but lately in my neck of the woods, we have seen several of our fellow organic dairy farmers that have decided to exit the business, which is certainly very just sad, really. Especially in light of the media kind of portraying all the wonderful things that's happening in other parts of the state. I guess what I'm saying is, Organic Valley coming in and Stonyfield taking those farms on really did not solve any of those underlying pressures on the milk market, especially organic, who seems to be getting crowded out between other special labels and plant-based alternative beverages. We need an environment that welcomes and wants to see more dairy that will utilize the existing resources here and add to them. I think I've mentioned in a previous testimony that I'm also on the Board of Supervisors for the Orleans County Natural Resource Conservation District, and I've learned quite a bit through that group. But one thing that I did learn is the importance of keeping our open lands working and keeping people managing them so that we are continuing to meet or make progress towards our water quality goals. In so many of our rural communities, dairy is still the main economic driver for the dentists, the supermarkets, the schools, and complementary service providers and other local businesses. Lately, I've been watching as large tracts of land are purchased near me and developed into these large homes that people live in for parts of the year. And while I'm humbled by their desire to be in a place that I've come to love, I've struggled to embrace them at times, as those fields won't ever go back into pasture or hay fields or meadows. We may have a few more Christmas trees though, but anyway, you asked me to comment on the cost of production and how 22 has turned out. I will say it has been a good year to cash flow and catch up on some repairs that have been put up for a very long time. The last year that we had a milk price even close to this was 8 years ago, 2014. But of course, it has been without inflation cutting into our margins. And I would contend that we as farmers were some of the first to experience that inflation as it started to bubble up last year in our feed costs and our fertilizer bills. So I did pull together my first 3 quarters of 22 to give you an idea of how inflation, how the changes have impacted my farm here. And I've compared it to the first 3 quarters of 2021. Milk income is up 54%. And my milk production is up 6%. You'll hear probably from some other farms that are restricted by base production who were unable to grow any production milk, as far as, especially, I'm part of Agrimark and we do have a restriction. However, our farm is under the 2 million exemption, which allows for that sort of that wiggle room. And we are able to make use of that. Certainly we are constrained by our facilities. We can only milk so many cows in our barn. It only holds so many. Interest is up 7%. Payroll and wages up 12%. Grain was up 12%, again, from about a 12% increase the previous year. Milk hauling is up 27%. Seed was up 37%. Repairs was 70%. But as I mentioned, a little bit of that was catching up on some stuff that gets delayed in low milk price years. Fuel is up 141%. Heating fuels is up 226%. And the big one, which is tough to swallow for some of my fellow Agrimark members, our milk marketing is up 456% from last year. We have 2 new line items.
And what do you mean by that, milk marketing?
So we have 2 new line items where between, and I hope that you'll hear from a representative from Agrimark, but as I understand it as a member, our cost to market our milk has increased to a point in Agrimark where they've had to come back to the members and sort of take a feedback, if you will, from our milk price. Okay, so it's a market adjustment fee, which is not unheard of or unknown in this area. DFA charges one, St. Albans used to charge one. And then there's been another additional assessment for when we've had other types of losses as well. So this was new for Agrimark.
So you don't get, when we get a slip from the milk market administrator's office and it shows that the price of milk and for 1, 2, and 3, and 4,
Yep.
and all that, you don't get that price, you get a different price.
Yes, correct. So, and then at the bottom of that slip, Bobby, is a line that says statistical uniform price. And that's sort of like a good price to start with. And then from there, we either have a location adjustment, we have an adjustment based on our fat and protein components, we have an adjustment based on quality, and now we have an adjustment, which again, quality, fat and protein can go up or down.
Yeah.
Location usually is coming down from the SUP price, the statistical uniform price. And now this market adjustment and the milk loss fee is a fee. It's not going to go up or down, right? So it's an additional cost of doing business.
So if you don't mind telling us, what are we talking about? $1 a hundredweight, $2, $3, or is that?
Yeah, no, it varies, 50 cents to $1. And then the milk losses have been on top, another fee on top of that. So it's not a secret. I mean, it's out there. And again, this is a way that to try to navigate through some of the challenging environment that Agrimark faces with low competition in terms of milk sales, as well as their own struggles in the manufacturing plants with getting enough product out the door.
Yeah, thank you. Any other? Go ahead.
Yep, nope, I will just cut to the chase and comment on those 3 pricing structures that you asked for comment on. My take is I would strongly encourage you not to move forward with anything that would discourage the use of Vermont milk or the potential future for processing in the state. as I look to other states that have imposed these types of fees, I've seen what's happened to the processing in their state and the demand for milk from there, which it could have been one of many factors, right? That has sort of decreased the demand for milk from these other states. But I would tend to lean toward the third option. If there's an option to go back to consumers to say, here's, if you want, milk sourced from Vermont, this is what you can do. I think that these types of folks, we know that these types of folks exist in Vermont because we have had a successful cow power program in our manure digesters. I think we have more manure digesters per cow capita, if you will, than any other state in the country. And that's because the economics behind it tend to favor, doing it and putting them in. And certainly while they're continuing to produce electricity, it's an option for food waste usage and that sort of thing as well. But anyway, these types of people also exist elsewhere, right? And so I think that if they know that, this, whatever, 10 cents, I know that it's been tried before. I know it was like a decade ago, and I think it was New England Farms Working Together or something. There was some 10 or 25 cent fee on a gallon of milk. And for whatever reason, it just didn't pan out. But there's got to be something, whether it's to just simply encourage favorable business environment. And certainly we've seen a lot of improvements in terms of facing the regulatory pressures. I think I've testified in the past how we've gotten assistance from our district manager and our natural resources conservation district. Hence, I'm on the board of supervisors there because I believe in the work that we're doing. And I believe in the work that these folks are doing in trying to be a conduit between USDA and NRCS and FSA and even the DEC, and trying to source, funds from this grant or that grant to shore up the opportunity for farms, especially, that can't just swallow. That is a difference, I suppose, between a small and a large farm. Can't just sort of, buck up the capital to swallow that additional cost of doing business. So I feel passionately about this stuff, guys. I'm sorry, I have to stop and take a breath every once in a while, but I mean, are there any questions?
John, Dan?
Yeah, can you give us an example of what you said before about a state that's done some kind of a program and has lost processing and sales?
Our northern neighbor, Maine.
And how do you see the regulation as having caused with the reduction of processing you're talking about? Is what are you referring to there?
I think they're down to one processing plant in Maine. Is that right?
No, they still have the two, the Hood plant and the old Oakhurst plant, which used to be owned independently, and then Dean bought it, and then when Dean went bankrupt, DFA absorbed the plants, but the plant structure is still the same. The two plants are still there.
And they're still operational.
Yeah.
I guess what I was thinking
Yeah.
about is just is hearing about the cost to assemble milk up there. The fact that it just doesn't seem to be like there's any and again, this is just observational. I have not done any research per se, but just that there's sort of a there's no desire to grow the market there in Maine. There's been stories and anecdotes of farms being sold and shut down, essentially. And so that's my concern is, why is that happening? Is it just simply the cost at the farm level, or is this fee on the handlers contributing to the lack of desire to have production coming from Maine?
Okay, so we're talking about Maine. Thanks.
John?
Joanne, what you mentioned, in addition to components, protein and fat, you mentioned quality of milk. So I hadn't heard that expression before. So if you
Oh.
could just explain.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So each cooperative has a program to encourage higher quality of milk, which is measured in terms of bacteria counts and somatic cell, the presence of somatic cell. So for example, the debate always comes up that naturally we should lower our standard for somatic cell to 400,000, when the reality is a lot of our co-ops are already there and then some. And they have had this incentive-based pricing structure to encourage people to really even kind of push lower and lower. And so we still have a quality program at Agrimark. I don't know that they get any premium from the marketplace anymore, because the quality of milk here in the States is just that, of that caliber, right? And so buyers just expect it to be there already. But regardless, we still do have a 3-tiered program, you know, and you can work towards 10, 20, and 30 cent premium above whatever that farm gate price is that you would get before it. So again, another incentive program that I think people respond to just naturally. It's human behavior in terms of a feed type program where you're penalized or something like that.
Other questions? Joanna, just a quick one. Who decides on the pricing for market changes or the things that you said you get charged for from the co-op? Do the farmers ever get a chance to vote on that themselves?
Oh, that's at the board level, Bobby. I'm sure it's it's a recommendation from management, and then the board votes on it.
So it's the board of directors of the co-op. Yep. Anything else from any of the members? If not, we'll move on. Mary White is next. Thank you, Joanna. Mary White, good morning, welcome.
Good morning. Nice to see you all again. Thanks for having me. So I just, I'll do a brief introduction first, and I just wanted to echo a little bit of what Joanna said. So my name is Mary White. My husband Elijah and I farm in Corinth, Vermont. We have an Agrimark herd. We milk 115 Holsteins. So we are classified as a small farm, but as Joanna spoke about before, we are over that threshold for Agrimark where we are under the base program restrictions. And going off just a little bit about what Joanna said, just back to the main conversation, I work with the Farm Bureau as well, and the conversations I have with Maine dairy farmers are they really appreciate the program is back, the money back from the state program, but the reality of it is there's no processing demand, and they're getting shut down and going out of business because simply the milk trucks are canceling their routes because that demand is not there. So that's really been a driving factor in what Joanna was talking about. So circling back to our farm, we strive for quality, and that does help our milk checks. And Joanna did a really good job of laying out the inflation costs, so I'm not going to get into that too much. But with the increase in price this year, we have seen the increased inflation as well. Obviously, feed, fertilizer, fuel are the big ones. Within our milk check, the producer price differential is always something we talk about, and that has been up positive this year. And when you look back on 2021, Bobby, I think we've had this conversation a few times, that was actually negative to zero. So that's money that gets pulled back from the federal order, and that's been affecting our price this year as well. So on the DMC side, we did receive a payment in August, a little surprising to the fact because milk prices are not down, as you alluded. So what happened in that formula was there is, again, and I'm not sure if it's a need or a lack of feed out west, but it was based on alfalfa prices is what triggered that payment here in the Northeast. So it was really not something we were actually seeing a need for here in the Northeast, because we are increasing, feed prices, but it hadn't drastically changed within that month like it had out west, but it still triggered a payment here. So our DMC payment that was made was actually enough to cover our premium for that entire year, to give you an example. And they are expecting another trigger payment, I believe, for September milk.
So, just a quick question, did you participate in the program that we passed last year where you send your bill in and so we helped to cover that cost?
Yes, that
Yeah.
was much appreciated. So we sent the check in and got reimbursed. And then right after we got the check back from the state, we were notified that the payment was coming through. So we hadn't received a payment yet for the program up until that point. And then it started to kick in. So it was, again, a nice surprise, but not necessarily the cost that I think were accurately reflected in our milk situation.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so one thing unique about our farm is we are geographically just 30 miles south of Cabot, where the processing plant is, but our milk is actually processed in West Springfield, Massachusetts. So that's something to think about when we start looking at how this program would work and how a farm like mine, whose milk is actually not processed in the state, would be calculated into a program along these lines. And there is a lot of milk, obviously, from other states that is processed in Vermont that is not technically Vermont milk.
Mary, back some time ago, we had Catherine Duran in, I believe is her name, from Agrimark. And boy, I haven't got it right here in front of me, Bob, and other committee members can pipe in. But I thought she told us that all the milk that they received from farms in Vermont went to Vermont plants to be made, and that if things were modernized, like an automated wrap and cut system was in place, their sales, they can't make their cheeses fast enough to sell them all. I mean, they could sell a lot more if they could produce and cut and wrap it and have labor to make it. So but other Agrimark farmers have told us the same thing, that their milk goes to West Springfield and not.
So maybe she was referring to the actual Cabot plant itself. Maybe only that plant processes Vermont milk, but that would be really hard because we commingle a lot of loads. That might have been what she was referring to, but if you look at the Middlebury plant, a lot of New York milk comes into that plant as well. And I know our milk has always gone to West Springfield.
Yeah.
But there is a labor issue in the Cabot plant itself. And that's the only real central plant I could think of that might have a chance of being mostly Vermont milk, would be that one plant in Cabot.
Yeah, you couldn't get much closer than you are, though.
Yeah, but milk travels south. That's what they tell me. It's more expensive to ship it north.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So just on the comments on your 3 items here, I would, again, it's hard for Agrimark right now to survive, as you alluded to, with labor shortages and just any milk we have that we're not able to process in our own plants. We're losing money trying to sell it because we're just being undercut by some of the larger players and the market conditions. So if we did something along the lines of a milk handler fee, I think it would be a negative to our cooperative. And if that's something you're looking at, I would want to see some way of making sure that that wouldn't get passed back to the farmers, because that kind of negates the whole I guess, goal of the program if we're trying to put money in farmers' pockets by assessing a fee. And as Joanne alluded to, it is common practice for some of those fees to trickle back down to the farms. So that was a red flag for me. And as far as the third one, setting a fee per packaged milk sold in Vermont, again, putting things on the consumers. Right now, I'm sure you guys are familiar with New England Dairy. A percentage of our milk check goes to that for local promotion. And we also have a percentage of our milk check that goes to the National Milk Federation for promotion as well. So we are actively paying for promotion right now. So I think the focus should be more on how do we get that penny back into the pocket of the farmer, rather than focusing on promotion, or maybe doing a partnership with New England Dairy, since Vermont farmers are already funding that resource. So that might be worth looking into.
Yeah, anything else, Mary?
I don't think we want to get into the federal milk marketing order right now. This is more state focused. So I would say no. I think we did a good job of just covering the basic points here.
Yeah, thank you, Mary. Are there questions from any of the committee members of Mary? If not, thanks a lot, Mary, for your time and your testimony. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Bobby.
We'll move on to Andy Birch from up north. Morning, Andy.
Good morning, Bobby. At the risk of sounding a bit like a broken record, this has been a very interesting year for us. Milk revenue has been really high, and we're up year to date over $100,000 on a 50 cow farm for increased milk revenue. Some of that is higher production, but a lot of it is due to the higher milk price that we were at. We were in the $29 range for part of the summer, and we're still, last I checked, right around 26. That said, of course, a lot of our costs have risen, often in the ballpark of 30%. Custom hire, which is manure spreading and harvesting, we're up by 50%. Grain costs are quite high, fertilizer, the list goes on. A lot of the same things that Joanna said. Seeds are corn seed for next year is going to be up 20%. We already know. And the net is our overall farm profitability has been higher than any other year I've experienced in the 8 years I've been doing this. The concern, of course, is that it looks like in the coming year we may revert to more normal milk prices, but still have the increased cost, which could be very difficult to deal with. We're already starting to see signs of market weakening. And as Joanna and Mary mentioned, we have extra costs due to marketing in the co-op. For me, it's been, we're about a 1.4 million pound farm, and year to date, we've paid $7,800 in market adjustment costs. That's $1 for the regular market adjustment, and then in a typical month about 15 cents for milk losses. Plotting our course forward, we're hoping to move into new facilities when we can get our act together, but of course we're also dealing with the 2 million pound cap and trying to size either based on that or see if we can find additional milk to be able to sell a little bit more. Yeah, a lot of difficult decisions. The DMC program has been very helpful the last few years, and we did participate in the state's program to get reimbursed for the cost of participation. And we've already signed up for next year.
Sounds like a good plan.
Yep.
Yeah. The part I'm still curious about is, you or I, any of us that go to a store, we certainly haven't stopped buying. I don't think, I know I haven't, buying like Cabot cheese, or if I need milk, I make sure it's Booth Brothers usually, if at all possible. And many times, not many, but several times, the Cabot cheese that I like, there hasn't been any in place because it's all sold out. So, I still haven't figured out why they're charging back to the farm a market adjustment cost. And, I guess I would say that if I've always been in the transportation business, and, if I kept losing customers, it wasn't usually a reason. If I did, which I never did, but if I did, I would go to my marketing guy and say, "What's going on here? You aren't producing. You aren't getting my trucks into our customers' yards for some reason, and you're losing customers. Why aren't you working harder at that?" or something along those lines. I wouldn't expect my other customers to pick up the cost because my guys were not producing. There should be a better way of them getting that money than going back to you guys. And another question: if they do take this money, do you get an increase in your equity or a bigger share in owning the co-op? Do you get anything for that money that they take out of your check?
The market adjustment is a separate line item from our equity charge. At the end of the year, assuming the co-op shows a profit, then that money either goes to equity for us or is paid out in dividends. By law, at least 20% of any profit has to be paid out in dividends, and the remainder goes to equity.
Yeah.
If that answers your question.
But so the market adjustment, you never get back then?
Not directly, no.
Oh. Thank you, Andy. Are there any questions from Andy? Randy?
Thank you. This is a question that I also should have asked our first two presenters, and it's one that I think I'll be asking every presenter just to make sure we don't forget anything. And that question is, what, if anything, should the state do to help revitalize the dairy industry in terms of your suggestions? One, and two, is there anything that the state should stop doing that is not helping the dairy industry?
So to echo Joanna, I do think we need to be careful that we don't make Vermont milk unattractive to processors versus our competitors. I'm worried, especially with any kind of extra assessment on milk hauling, that would be directly passed back to us. And I see a situation where basically there are two co-ops in town. One is largely based around here, one is nationwide. So if we made Vermont milk unattractive, it could be extra detrimental to the more local co-ops operations. And the national one maybe doesn't even need the Vermont milk in the first place. We need to be careful that our actions don't inadvertently suck the life out of our dairy industry. If these were easy questions, we would have fixed all of this years ago.
Thank you.
So sorry, I
Yeah.
don't have a better answer for you.
Joanna, did you have your hand is up?
Yeah, thanks, Barbara. I just wanted to chime in on what you're asking Andy about with respect to, comparing the trucking to the milk. I wish it could be that easy. There's lots of us who have been asking questions. Certainly, of course, in our model, in our cooperative model, we have the opportunity to ask questions about, why aren't we marketing more? Why aren't we doing more to put, because, the profit is made in our own product. So certainly, and of course, the pride that we have in our product, we'd love to see Cabot cheese in every household across the country. But the fact is that takes resources, it takes people. And I know that the challenges that Agrimark has faced in its processing plants have been outlined before. So it's not that it's not being worked on, right? But at the same time, the nature of the milk industry is that if we can't process this milk, we need to find a home for it. And unfortunately, those sales, I think that's where we're missing out when we have to, make it into powder, or we have to put, and maybe not powder. And I'm really kind of speaking out of turn here, but basically when we're not putting it into our branded product, is it raises the potential for a loss in that case. And so that's where we have to step up and kind of, if we want to see the viability of Agrimark, we want to see the future of our farms, we want to see more dairy in Vermont and not less, we have to support our co-op. And that's what we're doing. So it's unfortunate, it stinks, but hopefully we'll get through it to the other side.
Yeah, thank you, Joanna. Any other questions? John O'Brien?
I should have asked this sooner too to the farmers who have been on and the upcoming ones, but I just wondered, since you all are, accountants at some level, how much you budget a year to meet the RAPs from the agency or other agency of agriculture sort of guidelines or requirements? Because we heard some pretty high numbers earlier on in testimony. If anybody wants, if you know that sort of number.
So Andy, do you understand the question? What we got for our council went through all the things that's required of a farmer to meet the RAPs. And he came up with a figure of $1.78, I think $1.77, $1.78, 100 weight cost to meet all the water quality standards and the other standards, cover cropping and all those things that most farmers are doing. That's what he came up with a cost figure. And we're having that analyzed by the joint fiscal folks to double check those numbers. So I guess that's what John's question is. Have you ever figured that out, what it's costing on the farm?
I have never broken that out as its own figure. I know it's a significant time burden, keeping the nutrient management plan up to date. The Go Crop computer program has been improved over the years, but I still find it quite cumbersome and slow to deal with. But yeah, I'm sorry, I don't have a $1.78 figure I can give you at short notice.
Yeah, and I should clarify that number. That that number is the number that's higher than if you farmed along Lake Champlain, the guy across the lake from you doesn't have to cover that cost because their regulations are a lot different. And so that figure was estimated here in New England above your other farmers in, Maine, New Hampshire, and New York. So that's where that figure came from. So we'll get that eventually from JFO to see how, what they say. Jackie, do you have a question?
Yes, thank you. Just speaking to Andy's comment about the time cost. Can you remind me, maybe Dan knows, does that $1.78 a hundredweight include the time for farmers, or is that just the actual cost of the system or service? Because if we're not including their time, then it probably is a lot higher than that, especially for the bigger farms, if they have to include people who contract out to do that. So, if that $1.78 that you're quoting is only the actual cost of the services, I would say it's incredibly under budgeted.
I don't know if Michael's gotten on yet. I don't think so. But when Michael does get on, he had another appointment earlier today, and he's going to get on in a bit. So we'll ask Michael that, but I don't believe it included the farmer's time that they put into it. It's a practice that this cost covers.
Okay, I didn't think it included their time either, but perhaps we should have that conversation because it does take time off from managing the dairy itself.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Jackie, that would be my understanding as well, but we need to double check with Mike.
Yeah. If there anything else for Andy, Dan?
Yeah, thanks, Bobby. Andy, you mentioned at the beginning that your costs are up. Joanne said the same thing. So can you just give us some sense of where your cost of production looks against the pay price this year as compared to last year, and what you see going forward?
Okay. So in the past, our cost of production was was probably right around $18. And it seems like most costs have risen. I'm sorry, I messed up my math there. Yeah, we're certainly north of 20 now. I don't have it down to the penny, but I would say we're in the low $20. So there's still some margin with the $26 milk on our last milk check, recognizing that it's actually more like 25 with the extra marketing taken out. We've gone up probably about $3 a hundredweight overall, I would think. Sorry, I should have gotten a more granular answer ahead of time for that.
That's really helpful. So you're up $3 on the costs. They do the milk, your milk check and with the deducts, where that is on the other end. So you 18 and to 20, low 20s on the cost of production, and then on the pay side.
On the pay side, we're still with the way the dairy market is now, we are still in the green, even with the extra dollar being pulled off by the co-op. In another year, losing $1 a hundredweight would be alarming. This year, it's been, survivable. The milk prices were so high this summer. My concern is that we're heading back into more normal milk prices, looking at the futures. For now, anyway, that $1 a hundredweight is still going to be there. The higher grain costs are still going to be there, the higher fuel. Well, and even I had to give myself a raise to meet higher family living expenses this year, because everything
Gave
costs
yourself
more.
a raise.
Yep.
Boy, oh boy. Your wife's gonna get mad at you. I know who does the work up there. She sharing that raise, Andy?
I went up 15%.
No, I'm just kidding you. Um, Golly, that's a heck of a raise. I bet dollar wise. Yeah, well, that's good. You could give yourself take more out for yourself, and no, that's good. Steve, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I guess just listening to Andy's comments there about like that handling fee and the marketing fee from Agrimark, really that just got ramped up in August of this year. So it's only a part year that we've been subject to that. And the $3-ish that he speaks of the cost going up on the cost side of the ledger, I can tell you that sitting here today, Agrimark, their forecast for 2023 is that the milk price, they're looking at about a $3.75 a hundredweight less income in 23 versus 22 based on the way the markets look today. So your milk price will be down potentially $3, $3.50. And if Agrimark's fee stays in place for a whole nother year, which they've already kind of told us to expect that it will, that's a pretty big kick in a negative way.
Yeah.
So
At the level it's at now, it'll
Yeah.
be about $16,000 a year from my herd, at a little over 50 cows.
Yeah. So you multiply that by 10 if you've got 500.
Yep.
Well, thank you, Andy. Certainly appreciate you taking the time to be with us, and certainly I want to thank you for your time and energy and thought behind putting this all together. So we'll move on to Abby Course.
Good morning, everybody. Hi, Bobby. As is my usual custom, I have steamrolled my way into this conversation. Apologies for that. And I'm not quite as prepared as I normally would be because I didn't have a chance to put together all the numbers with the short notice. I guess where I'll start is our cost of production, I believe at the moment for milk only without family living expenses is around $30.26 a hundredweight or something like that. I know that Diane presented some of the organic specific data from Jen Miller's cost of production studies at NOFA earlier in your task forces meetings, but if you wanted more specific testimony or more focused testimony about that, I would recommend maybe bringing in Sarah Flack or Jen Miller, who could specifically talk more to some of the differentiations in the grass milk or low grain pieces, components of how that sort of breaks down. I think one of the things that we sometimes don't address quite directly enough is the differentiation in the requirements that organic farmers face versus the requirements that conventional farmers face and what the certification requirements require for our cost of production. The other thing I guess I want to make very clear is, Andy, I'm so glad you gave yourself a raise. Good job. I think one of the things that I have wanted to talk about so much more in the last few years is this unwillingness we seem to have to talk about what it takes to farm for the people who have to farm. And the fact that the part of the reason that I see this state is not able to keep farmers, right? I have two younger brothers, neither of whom are here. I am trying to take over the farm as one farming mother, both of the things to which I've devoted my entire life. pay horribly, mothering and farming. And neither of my brothers are here because there's no broadband, there's no job opportunity, there's no educational opportunity, there's no childcare. They literally cannot afford to be here. And we keep confronting this problem. And I think, I'm often scolded for coming into these conversations talking about things that aren't specifically related to farming when I'm talking about what the issues are that face me as a farmer. But the reality is, these are the issues that face me as a not quite 40-year-old farming mother in rural Vermont. The education system into which I put my children does not meet them equitably as it does in other places. And it's very different from when I was a kid growing up here, where my parents were able to raise the three of us off of their entire farm income. That neither of them has ever had an off-farm job. They still don't. And they were able to raise 3 kids and put us through college. Most of that was on our own merit, but because the school bus dropped us off at the end of the driveway. My mom didn't have to drive to another town to shuffle us to sports, to music, to any of those things, which is a reality that my husband and I face. He also has to work in another town because there isn't an opportunity here. And I just offer that because I think when we're thinking about the revitalization of our rural economic structures and our rural communities, these are things that we have to think about. How can we bring infrastructure back into these rural communities where farmland is, so that the people who are farming, the young families that we need to take over farming, can actually have the ability to raise their kids there, right? That's a fundamental component of bringing young families back. Is you want them to have kids, you want them to add to the tax base, you want them to put into the education fund. It's very difficult. That is one of the number one factors as to why it has been difficult to keep our farm viable, is the limitations that I face as a woman farming with children. And so I just offer that because I think we don't grapple enough with those satellite components of what makes up a rural community structure, and therefore what makes it possible for young people to come back to farming. And that is something that I, as a multi-generational farmer, I'm the 6th generation to live here and farm here. That is really something that I think has markedly shifted since I was a child to now, is the way that the education system, et cetera, affects my ability as a farmer to navigate, the time commitment, the actual requirements of what running a dairy farm is. Additionally, I don't have the numbers to tell you what the RAPs cost us. I'm guessing it's a little bit different in organic, again, because of the way that our requirements are set up and our certification requirements are set up, and grazing is necessary, et cetera, et cetera. But what I will say is in organic specific, one of the most specific things is that this country doesn't produce enough organic soybeans. And so the war in Ukraine and the way those supply chains have been affected has really skyrocketed the cost of organic soybeans. And there is a competition between organic poultry and hogs, as well as dairy, for those organic soybeans. And so that cost specifically has skyrocketed. The other issues are, I'm so glad that Mary talked about transportation. That's another huge thing that Organic Valley is contending with. And I was also thank you so much to Joanna for mentioning the fact that the narrative around organic dairy farming is not capturing what the reality for organic dairy farmers actually is. We're dropping like flies. We are currently at a point where our farm has 5,440 unpaid hours of labor in our cost of production, most of which is coming from my 68-year-old father who works over 100 hours a week. I've had people say, well, I love working 100 hours a week. I think that's great. I also think that if that's the requirement for people to dairy farm as a small farmer in Vermont, we're going to have a hard time bringing back dairy farming or small farming in Vermont. And the other thing, to Randy's point, You asked what the state could do differently. I do think there's a question that needs to be asked at a certain point. Each size farm, I think, brings a different richness and a different benefit to the working economy of Vermont, right? And I think what the small farms bring is something that isn't something that we're currently being paid for, which is tourism. I live, 20 minutes from Mount Snow. My mom is always joking that we should put out donation boxes along the roadside for all of the people from New York and New Jersey and Connecticut who slow down to watch my heifers run around in the field or to watch the milkers go up and down the road in the foliage and things like that. And I do think that there's a question we could ask. We tend to focus in farming on what's the byproduct, right? What's the product that we're selling, and that's milk. I also think that misses some of the point, particularly in Vermont, where we have introduced this really high level of environmental stewardship to farm here, right? So in small farming, you can't meet the same economies of scale. I don't necessarily think, I just don't believe that consumers want small farms to disappear. And so I think there's just the need for a different question to be asked. What does it mean to be a small farmer in Vermont? And what are the services that as small farmers specifically you're providing that can't be made up for in economies of scale for your production, but potentially could be compensated in another way for a different type of benefit that you're bringing to the state? And I would go so far as to say, obviously, it's not just the small farms, certainly medium-sized farms and large farms, like I said, bring their own components. But specifically for those of us who are putting cows on grass, which so many people market based on, right? That's the marketing scheme for some pretty famous things in Vermont. But you're not paid to put cows on grass necessarily unless you're certified organic. So Joanna and Andy, I think, grazes, and I think Mary does too, they're not getting anything back for that grazing, but that grazing, Bobby knows this from hearing me as the farm and forest sector rep for the Climate Council, that grazing is really critical to our ability to reduce our emissions levels in Vermont. That's one of the number one, Heather can speak to this, strategies for reducing or increasing carbon sequestration and reducing some of our emissions. So that's a lot to throw at you.
Hey, yeah, Abby, you told us what your cost was, but the pay price has gone down dramatically, hasn't it, on organic?
I believe in Organic Valley, the base, and I do apologize, Bobby. I can certainly follow up and send you these numbers. I have them all. I couldn't coordinate with my mom quick enough. I believe the base Organic Valley pay price now is, I want to say it's between $26 and $28 a hundredweight. And we focus on quality, not quantity. There is still a very significant quality markup. Organic milk, I believe we can't go on the truck unless we're below 200,000 somatic cell count, but we maintain around 100. And so we get quality premiums for that and really focus on that. But I know that there was a point at which we were making $38 or $40 a hundredweight. We converted to organic in 2008.
Yeah.
I want to say this was around 2010, and that's when we were really making money. And now that is about what our cost of production is, and we're making, about, sometimes almost, there are farmers that are making $10 less a hundredweight than what their cost of production is. And that doesn't necessarily include the unpaid labor hours. To my point again, that, why would we pay farmers to farm and feed us?
Yeah, your dad's donating quite a lot to the farm every day.
My dad donates quite a lot, all kinds of places.
Yeah, thank you, Abby. Are there questions for Abby from anyone? If not, thanks, Abby. Appreciate your time and your good work.
Thank you for sneaking me in. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So we'll move on to medium-sized farm, Stephanie Pope.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Loud and clear.
All right, thank you. Thank you for having us here today. We appreciate this. I'm Stephanie, and I'm a medium farmer in Addison County, and we're right on the lake shores of Lake Champlain, so we're a little more unique just because of our location. And I really feel whether you're milking 50 cows or 500 or 1,500, a lot of our issues are the same throughout across the board. I won't spend too much time on the labor costs and increases and shortages because it's across the board for every industry, any business, everybody's struggling there. But the one unique thing is with farmers is we are obviously 365 days a year, and it's getting harder and harder for us to find people in production agriculture, but also for our processing plants. We're having huge issues there, and that hits us with all the increases. That falls on eventually on the dairy farmers' back as well. And then, so like I said, I won't spend too much time on that because everybody is in the same boat there. But I do think we need to find a way to become more efficient and maybe, robotic milkers, whatever the case, more mechanically inclined so we can, avoid these labor issues at our plants and on our farms. The big issue, I think, these days for us is the supply issue, and with inflation and the rising cost of inputs, our cost of production has gone up probably just over $5 a hundredweight. And it's fine right now while we're making $24 or $25 milk, but we're staring down the barrel of, $20, $21 milk coming this spring. And, we use DRP, DMC, the DMC insurance, but that is also an extra cost. And it's very expensive to insure all your milk, and it just adds to the cost of production. To put this into perspective a little bit so you can hear real numbers, I just pulled these from our QuickBooks, and this is year to date, year over year. So in 2021, our fuel year to date to January to November 14th was 124,800. This year today is just shy of 221,000. That's over a $95,000 increase year to date. Feed 2021 was 1,037,904. And today is 1.242,224 for just over $204,000 increase. Those are two expense categories for us, and I could go on and on all day, but you get the picture on that. I think one of the big issues too, and we saw it in the organic market when one of the milk markets left the area. I think the state and everybody did a great job to find the farmers affected milk markets, and I'm very happy that they were able to find milk markets. But in my opinion, it's a scary situation for the future of dairy in Vermont. In the conventional sector, there are two milk markets. What happens if we only have one, and the one, is a very large co-op, there's nothing to say that they can go up and down the road and say, we're going to take your milk, not your milk. And then if you don't have a milk market and it's near impossible to find a milk market, there's no other choice but to go out of business, and that is a very scary thing to think about. And I think watching what happened in the organic market a year ago was a sobering, reality that we all face at this point. And then that's not to say anything about young people that may want to start up a farm. It's impossible for them to start a milk market. So what does that say about our future as an industry, And these are just thoughts. These are my opinions and these are my thoughts. This is just for discussion, but I think it warrants, thought. and thoughts about the future and how to help, and maintain co-ops and support dairy farmers in the state. I don't know how recent this report is from the International Dairy Food Association, but it is what dairy contributes to the state, both directly and indirectly. And it states that there's over 15,000 total jobs, and it contributes $4.39 billion in total economic impact to the state. And this is a really old number, but it's the last published number that dairy cow adds $12,500 to the economy. And I know our money all stays local in the state. Every dollar we spend is pretty local. So you start taking out farms of 500 or 600 cows and, at $12,500 per cow, you're losing a pretty big economic impact, especially to the local economy. So I also think those are interesting numbers, because I think we always, focus on, I don't want to say negative, but, we always focus on the battle. Those are pretty great numbers that dairy, very positive impact on the economic in the state of Vermont. I do think I speak for a lot of people when I say that we're here because we love what we do. It's not just a job, it's a way of life, and a way of life for our family. We like to provide nutritious food for our neighbors and people. And I hate being a negative Nelly and always looking at the negative part, and just to tell you a little bit about here, we have the next generation, on board. My niece graduated from the UVM 2+2 program, and she's back on the farm, and, she's 22 and young and wants to do this. And I have a 9-year-old son that, he tells everybody he wants to be a dairy farmer when he grows up. And I'm going to try like hell, excuse my French, to, have something sustainable for him, but I don't have the heart to tell him either. Buddy, you might want to think about doing something different, So here we are trying to make the best of it and provide, food for our neighbors and take care of the land and do the best we can,
Well, thank you. Thank you, Stephanie. Are there questions from any of the committee members? So, Randy, do you want to ask Stephanie your question?
Well, yes, it is a question that I'm asking everyone, and that is there anything that you can think of that we haven't talked about already that you think the state could do to help revitalize the dairy industry?
Well, that's a loaded question, and I think I'd like more time to think about that. But on the spot, I think, I think supporting and helping, either co-ops or dairy farmers to become more efficient, through, mechanical, issues. Like I said, everything that happens at the processing plant comes back to the farmers. So I think we need to look at those kind of things to, eliminate those bottleneck issues so we can get our product out there so we can all, make money and be profitable, So I think that is something that warrants, some time or something to look at, for the future going forward. And I'm sorry, I just joined, so I don't know what everybody else said. But I heard Abby, I believe her name was, and I think that come this spring, we're going to see a lot more farms go out of business. I just don't think it's going to be financially possible for people to continue. And the economic impact of that, especially on local economies, is huge. And I think that is often overlooked in all of these conversation we have. I know water quality is a big issue, but I think the impact of, what dairy farmers provide economically is often overlooked. And I think that you're going to see a lot of, like I said, I hope I'm wrong, but with looking at the input prices and the market prices and then what milk is doing, I just don't see, I see a lot of people going out of business. And unfortunately, I think that is bad for the state.
Stephanie, during your presentation, you mentioned the DMC program costing you money. Did you participate in sending your receipt in to the agency and getting that paid back to you?
I haven't received a check yet, but I'm hoping to. And I thank you for that, because that is huge. Like DMC last year, especially, I think is probably how we survived, a little bit. So I do thank you for that. But I have not received a check yet. And like I said, I'm hoping to.
Yeah, and it was the task force committee that brought that forward in the Ag Committee during the last legislative session that generated that money. And the other thing is, if you sign up for this next year and get that paid and get the bill in, that'll be covered this next year as well. So please take advantage of that and spread the word to your neighbors. Are there any other questions for Stephanie? If not, next on the list, is Brent Urie with us? No. So we'll move on to Steve Cahart. Morning, Steve.
Good morning. Sorry about that. I had to unmute myself. Good morning. Good morning. So I've enjoyed kind of listening to the other farms, the other producers speak this morning and hearing input back from other folks. I think you guys have divided into small, medium, and large farms, and I'm really not sure at the end of the day that there's that much difference between any of us. The same things that influence and affect, the small farm has just as big an effect, sometimes a larger effect on a farm as the farm size increases. I guess I'll start a little bit with kind of, the discussion on milk price and our cost structure and what we've seen that do for the year. I am extremely thankful that 22 has turned out to be a very good on the income side of the ledger. We've undoubtedly received really good prices for milk all year long. I finished Saturday my budget for the month of November, and for October milk, after counting premiums, we were just shy of $27 a hundredweight, which is fantastic. The expense side has definitely crept up in a big way. But the one thing that I haven't heard say today is that one of the things that the good prices have done is it allowed us to kind of make some balance sheet changes. A lot of people have been able to pay down some debt, pay down accounts payable, get their balance sheet in a little bit stronger position, so that we're more prepared as markets get tighter and we don't know what happens on the expense side. I could tell you that our cost for the year, Andy spoke about $3, and I think that's a really pretty sound number. Right now, through the first 3 quarters of the year, my cost year to date is around $23 $2.50 a hundredweight. That number will come down a little bit as I get into the end of the year because a lot of my cropping expenses are already paid for the year. So a lot of my expenses have been paid, but I still would expect that we'll finish the year 2250, somewhere in that ballpark. Year to date, my fertilizer expenses are up 75%. Fuel and diesel fuel is up 78%. Custom work, which is the people that custom apply manure for us. It's the people that spray our corn, side dress our corn. Those costs are up about 70%. Those rates have all risen as the cost of diesel and energy has crept up. Marketing fees, I won't beat that anymore, but that's 100% increase, and is probably one of my biggest concerns for next year is how on earth am I going to find that extra wiggle room in my budgets.
Who do you send your milk to, Steve?
Agrimark.
Yeah.
What I internalize it is if the rates right now continue next year, it's going to cost me about $450,000. And I don't think it should be a surprise to anybody that we don't operate on margins like that in this industry. So I don't know where it's going to come from, but that's a severe concern of mine.
Well, there's only one place, right, that it can come from, and that's out of from those cows you milk every day.
Well, I understand that, but the way that it funnels down is it's a direct deduct off from my milk check. And if at the end of the month I don't have the money to meet my expenses, then I go to my lender and I borrow the money.
Yeah.
So ultimately it comes from a creditor if that's the situation that you're in. The other thing that hasn't been really mentioned is payroll. Our payroll expenses are up about 15% for the year. And I haven't heard anybody talk really about labor. We have tried all year long to hire a couple people for outside cropping, machinery operator, mechanic positions. And we have had 2 people throughout the course of the year that we have offered a position to. Neither of them accepted the job with us. One of them had a job making $29 an hour. And then the other gentleman was 26 years old and he was making 6 figures a year as a mechanic. I can't compete with that. So that's a big time challenge. So that's kind of the, not all doom and gloom, because like I said, this year has been a fantastic year, but there's a lot of concern going forward into next year. One of the charges to us and your questions for us were, what are the concerns for us with the environmental cost to our business with meeting environmental regulations? And I have a couple different thoughts with that. There's a fair amount of these things that are expenses that don't show up as a dollar cost on a QuickBooks expense sheet, but that they're there. Cover crops that we all do a lot of anymore are very valuable to us in a lot of different ways, but they're not free to plant by any means. There is some cost sharing done through the state, through the FAP program and different programs that help with that, but that only scratches the surface of what it costs to plant cover crops on our property. The buffers that we observe and the buffers that are on all of our fields, everyone understands the importance of them. The however side of that though is when you're talking about the edge of a field, it's the largest amount of, it's the circumference of your field. It's a big piece of land. And when you have that on all of your property, that number adds up. And when you're not fertilizing it as you normally do, or not growing crops on it as you normally do, there is a cost to that, to us as a producer. Manure injection. We inject in the fall of the year, almost 100% of our corn ground gets injected to prepare for the following year. The cost for us to inject a gallon of manure last year was about 2.3 cents per gallon. The cost for me to hire my custom applicator to surface apply manure is about half of a penny. So it's about a 4-fold increase in my real out-of-pocket expenses to inject that manure. I wouldn't do it any other way because I understand the benefits of it, but there's a cost there that we are bearing. And I wanted to point that out. Also on the environmental side, there's a regulation cost. We all pay an LFO fee, or at least I pay an LFO fee, which is the fee that I pay to be regulated, which I understand, but there's a cost there. We also have, Andy Birch spoke of his nutrient management plan, and we have someone that does that for us. Year to date, or on an annual basis, it costs around $12,000 for me to have my NMP plan prepared for us. And I guess the only other thing I would say that I want to touch on the environmental side, and this is bigger topic stuff, but it's a little bit of my concerns for the long-term viability of the dairy industry in the state of Vermont. I totally understand the environmental regulations that we're under. I want a clean lake as much as anybody else, but the reality of it is in other parts of the country, they're not under as strict environmental regulations and don't have the same kind of burdens on their businesses that they bear every day. And so unfortunately, that makes my cost of production here larger than my neighbor that may be in Indiana or Michigan or pick your state.
Steve, could I interrupt you for a minute?
Absolutely.
How do you like paying those extra fees for your environmental stuff, and the guy that you can see across the lake that's farming it doesn't cost them anything? And then your milk and his milk goes to the same place, and you both get that marketing fee, but your cost is say $1.78 more than his, and yet you're helping to keep the plant going in Springfield to keep that healthy and well.
Yeah, I don't like it, and you feel that all the time. Granted, dairy it's been a great way of life for me. It's been a great way to raise my family. But at the end of the day, it's a business, and it's a very, very competitive business. And my neighbors are my competitors, be it my neighbor that's next door to me in Addison County, or my neighbor in New York State, or my neighbor in Michigan. They're my competitors. And at the end of the day, whoever has the least cost of production, is going to be in the industry the longest.
Yeah, thank you. Your granddad was I think it was your granddad, Roger, your grandfather, I believe, and he worked with us when we were doing the Northeast Dairy Compact.
Yes, my grandfather Roger was a very big piece of that.
Very good buddy of mine.
Yeah, I miss him very much. But you know, the one question that was asked in there was about the stuff on the pricing side, over order premiums and fee for packaged milk. And I don't have a good grasp on what's been done with that over time. Other than that, I would only mirror what I've heard other producers say, and there's fear that you're going to make our product less competitive in the marketplace. So I'm very hopeful that if there is something that comes out of it, that it's not a double-edged sword. The only thing that I feel like I don't even understand it that well is the program that's in Maine. It seems like whatever they've done there, they've had in place for a long, long time. And it seems like it's been successful.
Well, people have gotten used to paying, and that's why it's so important for all of us to realize that people like me that buys commercially or buys, at the store, we're already paying the long price at the store. And if the price goes down to you guys, we're going to continue to pay the long price at the store, and somebody else is going to get the money. And, we're trying to figure out a way to keep that stream of money coming to you folks that are producing the raw product that makes these excellent products that come out of Vermont. But anyways, that's beside, the point. And
Right.
go ahead. Did you have more to say?
Not really. I guess the one, I don't know if I was clear in this, but I feel like we've been asked, what can the state do? What can the state do? And I feel like through, FAP programs and a lot of that kind of cost sharing stuff, they've done what they can do. And, I get it. The state doesn't have unlimited buckets of money. But I tried to point out today some of those costs that we share on that environmental side, the manure injection, the cover cropping. It doesn't take very long for a farm to max out the FAP grant in a real hurry, and the rest of that then is on the back of the farmer.
Yep.
So,
Steve, do you know when you have the fuel man come and fill your tank, do you pay a sales tax on that fuel?
On diesel fuel, hold on. Yeah. I mean, there's the off-road diesel. Yes, you do. You still pay state fuel tax on off-road diesel.
Yeah. That's good to know. I know the boys at home, they pay it on-road diesel when it comes. And not heating oil because they buy gas, but propane they pay a sales tax on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything else, Steve?
No, that's all that I had prepared.
Yeah. Any questions from committee members? John?
Steve, this question for you and the other dairy farmers too, is that, the price this last year has been pretty great for, what you're getting paid for milk. But I always think have you ever tried to figure out what kind of gap you need between your mailbox price and your production price to really make a go of dairy farming. So, if you're only getting paid 20, but your production cost is 1,500, that seems like it'd be way better than if you got, 30 in the mailbox, but it was 29 for producing that milk. So it seems like the differential, the gap between what you get paid for your milk and your production is the really important thing. And I've never really heard what, in Vermont, what that gap has to be for Vermont dairy farmers to be, economically viable. And I don't know if you've ever thought about that or the other farmers on the call.
I don't know, John, I could give you like a number. I know what happens here with us is, when you have a year that there's excess margins, most times you take that and you reinvest that back in the business to fix things that, need attention. So I don't know that I have a dollar value figure for you. No, I don't, unfortunately.
Any, Dan?
Thanks, Steve. You mentioned before that the grant funding is available to pay some of the environmental compliance costs. Do you have a sense, like a percentage wise, of how much of the overall cost the funding covers and how much is on your back, ballpark?
Oh, it's the cost. My memory of the FAP grant, I may be wrong in this because my brother does this side of the business, but I want to say it's $5,000 is like the max. And that's a drop, a literal drop in the bucket to the, the cost side of stuff for us. Fractions.
Yep. Thanks.
Any other questions for Steve from committee members? No? Well, thank you very much, Steve, for your time. I know you've been with us most of the morning and certainly appreciate all that you do and spending the morning with us. We believe it or not, we've got a late arriver that just.
I'm not really ready right now. Keep going.
Oh, you want to keep going? Because
I just found out about it. I'm no internet, no nothing. I couldn't even call you. Called you on Veterans Day.
Brent Yuri drove down because lack of internet and everything else. And Brent, we're working on trying to get the broadband
Everywhere.
to go to the farm, run a line all the way to the farm, and then hook everybody up on the way back. So you guys will get online and be able to come into the modern age of farming. But anyways,
I'm not the modern age.
Kylie, you're up and you're morning and welcome. So I guess you're on next.
Yeah, let's keep going.
Okay. I've got some notes that I can share. I'm Kylie Chittenden. I'm the second generation at my home farm. We're located in Shoreham and we're an LFO like Steve. So I'm just gonna start out. It seems like the information about costs, I feel like you guys have a pretty good grab on now from all the other presenters. I'm a little different in that I'm a DFA farm. And it seems like you've heard a lot about the programs with Agrimark. Our base program is a touch different. I'm not sure if one's better than the other, but it's different. Ours is different because the costs associated with shipping over base milk are, they're charged to us for the month that they're incurred. So we're getting a signal about over base milk after we've already made it. That creates some challenges to managing our production and managing our cost side because we don't know what that charge will be. And it's ranged from, a few cents to many dollars. So I'm not sure which is better, but that's how our program is. just looking at what you guys have tasked us with for thoughts, first I want to say I'm really excited that this group is looking at our industry and what we can do in the state to be different and better. So that's really exciting. The comments that what I read, I guess like the others, I would discourage any extra charges that would discourage investment in our state for further processing. And a couple of those bullet points, I feel like will do that. But I think what we could do is encourage our delegation to support the national milk proposal for the higher of class 3 or class 4 in our milk pricing. Right now, we had a change recently to an average of those two prices, and that impacted the milk check. And so I think that's something that's like easy to do. Well, easy, I say that, nothing's easy in our industry, but I think that's something that some conversations with our delegation could really, on a national level, make some impact if they can take that football and carry it. The other thing that I think is, I think Joanna's line of rising tides, help all ships, finding ways to encourage more processing within our state, I think would keep more milk processed in our state, would be good for our economy. I think the way that we could help attract some of that would certainly be some tax breaks. Vermont's a hard place to start a new business. And I just think that what could we do on the state level to encourage that? And I know it's been said before, I just want to reiterate, a large percentage of our milk is exported out of our state, not consumed in our state, and also processed out of our state. I was thinking about maybe this group, I think, is it reinvigorating or can't remember what the term is, but I guess I would push us to look at our industry in a way that we can be more innovative. And I'll use the example, like stick with me because this may feel like a stretch, but Ukraine versus Russia. We are not going to compete here with Wisconsin. We're not going to compete with California. The Midwest, their cost of production, we can't keep up with that. But what we can be is innovative in our state. And I think we need to think about how can the state support further innovation. Ukraine is small, but they've become mighty. Vermont is small. How can our industry become mighty? So ways that I feel like we could revive and shift more toward words like innovative, sustainable. How can we do that? Like others have said, I would focus on the expense side of our profit and loss statements. On-farm energy production, we hear a lot about that. My farm is in an area where I can't add a digester. It's a stretch to add a big solar field. So what could we do? One suggestion that I have, can you hear me okay? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
One suggestion that I've been reading about is batteries, right? So we're charged two different rates throughout the day. There's peak and off peak. My cows don't care if it's on peak or off peak, but with batteries on farm and farms my size, could we store more power to reduce our energy? Could there be grants designed for things like that? That would be innovative and different. It would also impact my cost of production. Let me see what else. And I think it'd be a curious thought of what percentage of our state's milk is produced during peak versus off peak. That could have some real numbers. I don't know how you go about figuring that out, but I'm sure it could be done. A lot of farms that are LFOs are milking around the clock. We shut down for an hour and a half a day. We joke that the floor in the parlor never dries. We wash it just long enough to get feet back on it. Okay, other ways, Steve touched on this. We need to figure out a way to attract our middle tier managers. It's a struggle right now to find employees. On my farm, we've started to utilize the TN visa program. And I think there's programs, that's been a really helpful program for us. But I think Vermont could become a mecca to create a vacuum of people to our state. We have this state education, like the UVM and that whole
our state schools, could we create a program where we have people from South America, from Europe, coming to learn about agriculture and then having a role on farm? Could agriculture marry up and we fill some of those middle tier management type jobs? The payment that the state has designed to attract people to come live in Vermont, that hasn't been really that impactful for the dairy industry because a lot of reasons. One, people don't want to come to Vermont per se, for that payment isn't impactful to them. But not only that, the housing, there isn't enough housing. And one thing our farm has had some success with is younger couples right now can't afford to buy a house in Vermont. So if you have a nice house, that becomes like a kind of a carrot to get people on our dairies. So I'm going to segue to, there's been some housing grants that have come out. We need more of that kind of stuff because we're competing with other areas of the country for these middle tier managers. And we have to find ways on farm to differentiate ourselves and bring families and good talent in. So offering housing is really important, and quality housing. Let me see what else. I guess the other thing along the lines of innovation, there's a lot of talk about on-farm grain production. That's new in Vermont. I think that's going to gain some legs, and I think the state supporting that level of innovation is really important, maybe through grants. I'll tell you, on my own farm, we have an in vitro fertilization center. There's a lot of work being done right now on feed efficiency and different genetics. I feel like there's going to be some opportunity for looking at what cows we're milking, and are we creating the most feed efficient cattle? And that could be a branding thing for Vermont. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I can share with you. Oh, a big thing. I participated in a program with Heather Darby this summer looking at our forage production. And one thing that I learned from that group is there's a huge need for feed storage centers on all size farms. And that's important because it like hits that line of innovative and sustainability, because our feed loss, it also hits the profit, the expense side of our profit and loss statement. We're really good at not having quite enough area for feed to be stored. And the investment right now to increase our feed storage is just tremendous, like $1 million for a new feed center on my farm. So how can we have pots of money that are intended for environmental improvements, but there's no way to, we have to like do some crafting to make those fit for things like feed storage. And like I said, all size farms need that right now, the smallest to the largest. And I guess I'll stop right there. I think I shared pretty much every one of my ideas.
And Kylie, I don't know on where our milk is used and where it goes. You know, we've had quite a lot of testimony in regards to that. And years ago, 85% of our milk was shipped out of state and 15% used here. And you know that number is almost flipped over. We're at like 70 some odd. Michael's on the line. Michael Grady's with us, but who might have that number handier. But we're up in high 80s and high 70s. Almost 80% of our milk is utilized here in Vermont, and only 20 or so percent is exported to southern New England or down Boston, Hartford, Providence. And what's bothered me for years as chair of the Ag Committee is we have our farmers producing excellent quality milk here in Vermont. And then the processors buying milk in New York State, bringing milk into our Vermont plants, and then taking our milk from Vermont and taking it down to Springfield and run it through the powder plant, which we all know is a money loser, along with some of that New York milk. And our milk could basically pretty much all stay home and be manufactured here. And the New York, but yet you would pay the fee for that milk going into West Springfield, and really not needing to utilize that process down there. But, you know, those are all things that we as your representatives have to look at and think about and try to figure out, why are we paying to keep, why are our farmers paying to keep West Springfield going and producing a lost product and paying that shipping and all the good things that go on, when we could almost utilize that milk, all of it right here at home. We built a thriving industry between the yogurt plant and Ben and Jerry's and the Cabot plant. You know, if we had one more big industry in Vermont, we'd have to bring milk here to keep it going. So, but I wanted to pass that on as just for a thought. And then on the housing issue, we did hear from you folks back, in the spring, but last year, and we did put a bunch of money in VHCB just for farm labor housing and whether it's to fix what we had up into a better standard or to build even new. And so I just wanted to pass that on to you so you could check with VHCB and Vermont Housing Conservation people, Gus Seelick, and maybe could get some stuff headed in your direction if you need it.
I have done some of those projects, and the one that I'm most aware of was a $30,000 cap, which as inflationary prices have gone up, 30,000 goes quick in some of these houses. So that's where I'm trying that out.
Yeah, that's per apartment. So if you had, a house with 2 apartments, you should be able to get up towards 60. But keep chasing that because it could be helpful.
Yep.
Are there other questions for Kylie from committee members? Heather?
Hi, Kylie.
Hi, Heather.
It's not really a question. I just wanted to comment on a comment that Kylie made about the program that we did with her farm. She was one of several farms involved. Hopefully we're going to be able to continue with that. But she mentioned feed storage being a real issue in this state. Now, we brought this up last year through this Dairy Revitalization Committee. It did make its way into the final sort of recommendations. It didn't go too far from there. So I guess I would just suggest to our committee that we go back and revisit that language and possible opportunities around the feed storage piece. We pay a lot of money to store manure on our farms through grant programs, but we don't have any opportunities to help farmers store feed in better ways. And as Kylie mentioned, of the 10 farms that are involved in that program, which is a forage and feed management program, 9 of the farms do not have adequate or suitable storage for feed. Whether it's not enough, not having the ability to separate the feed properly so that they can feed higher forage diets and minimize, buying grain, etc. It's a real real significant issue in our state. We need to figure out how to address it. It's a farm viability issue and a big one. And then back to, oh, thanks, Kylie. Go ahead.
Just, I was going to say safety concern as well.
Yeah. I mean, it touches many, many different areas: environment, farm viability, safety, et cetera. And then back to Steve had mentioned the Farm Agronomic Practice Program, the FAP program that's run through our state that was developed years ago, a few years, maybe 5 years after I started here. And it's been a really great program for farmers. The cap is low. It's increased a bit. Steve mentioned it was 5,000. It was increased to 8,000 a few years ago. It covers a whole slew of practices, from cover cropping to injection to rotation. But for most every farm, that's not a lot of money. It's not hardly any money, actually, and not to be unappreciative of anything. A lot of farmers have actually had to stop, the amount that they're cover cropping. They just can't afford it. And the cost share programs don't go far enough. So it's unfortunate.
Is that a state or is it a state federal combination?
No, that one's a state. That's state funded through the Vermont Agency of Ag. It's great. It's a great program. It's easy to apply for, to report to. It's just, has limited funds. And Steve already mentioned there's no lack of appreciation by any of the farmers around what they have access to. It's just, unfortunately, just if there was more, that would be very helpful.
Yeah. Anything else, Heather? We'll switch to Jackie.
Yeah, sorry. Okay, bye.
Hi, Kylie. How you doing? Good to see you.
How are you?
Good. So I just wanted to make two comments. The money that the legislature put through for that farm labor housing was incredibly oversubscribed. They had a lot of farmers applying for that money, and I think they only did 10 or 15 projects. So hopefully, Senator Starr, you can get back to Gus, because I know there was extra money that they saved or set aside to see how the program was going to be used. And obviously, we need more, and we need to move that money out of the HCB into the, I think it's a Champlain Housing Trust is the group that's working with it, and Dan Baker from UVM, because it was great, but there were too many farmers that really realized the value of that, and there was not enough money that was put into it. So I would put that as a high priority for us for next year if we can do that. And the other thing I'd just like to say, there's been some comments about moving milk out of state and in state, and that plant where Mary White's milk goes to is an Agrimark Cabot plant. It's the butter powder plant down there in West Springfield. And oddly enough, for a long time, it was the balancing plant when we had too much milk in the Northeast, which we don't now. But if you try to buy butter today, it's upwards of $6 a pound. So that should be making some money for the Cabot people. Of course, it's Thanksgiving, Christmas, and that's when we all start baking. But I know that when we used to ship milk, we were 3 miles from the Cabot plant, and our milk went directly over the mountain. But moving milk backwards is always a concern for cooperatives. They don't like to do it. There's a cost involved. And so, it's unfortunate that we hear that folks are that close to a plant, but the milk goes out of the state, but it's still going to a cooperative owned business. So just wanted to put that in there. And Kylie, I'm interested in, you're talking about feed storage, and I guess I'm having a senior moment. I don't remember us talking about that last year. What are you looking, are these like open sheds, or are they, can you explain a little bit more about what you were looking at?
Sure. So back to looking at the profit and loss side, the expense side of our financial statements, a lot of us have looked at how can we increase the amount of forage in the diets that we feed. So there's been a lot of focus on how can we make better forages, how can we make more forages from the ground that we have. As we've gotten better at that, on the same footprint, we're creating more feed. And the size of our bunks has not kept up with with how our technology in the field has increased. And so that's where I'm saying the cost of the concrete, the environmental leachate systems that we have to put in place, there isn't a program within NRCS or within the state when we're looking at all the environmental programs that or grants that we can work with. There isn't one that fits that. And that's a really expensive update that we need.
Great, thanks a lot.
Any other questions for Kylie?
Could I just add on to that just a tiny bit about to Kylie's response? She had mentioned the size of the storage, but I would say in some cases they may have a bunker that's of adequate size maybe to store all the feed, but we actually don't want all the feed mixed together. And we went out to a farm recently and, you know, they had 6 different, you know, they had corn and haylage and different cuttings, you know, just sort of all in the same bunk. And they have no way to sort of separate these feed stocks of various qualities, even various types, so that if we want to feed the high producing group, you know, a 70% forage diet and the low producing group, an 80% forage diet with these different forages that they've produced on the farm, we can't really do that on most farms because everything is cobbled together also. So it's in some cases having more storage where they're losing a ton of feed because they've overfilled the bunks and they've paid to put it up, but then they're throwing it away because it's rotted. Or people that just don't have, you know, like you have a commodity shed where you put your corn, you don't mix in your minerals and your soybeans and, you know, whatever else you have into one shed, you keep them separated. And so we're trying to do a better job at, you know, putting various types and qualities of forages into storage so that we can utilize them better.
Yep.
So people are buying less grain.
We're also looking at different varieties, like
yes,
growing things that are higher energy or higher protein to replace those inputs that we're buying that are actually imported into our state, like canola, soy, cornmeal. The more of those we utilize, the nutrient load that stays within our state.
Yeah. This is almost, I don't know. I haven't heard of the storage issue really pretty much until today, but that would be certainly, you know, something to deal with certainly in the future. Yeah, get a little support out of the ag department to move that along would be most helpful. Jackie?
I just wanted to ask a quick question of Heather. Are the farms that you're working with across the board, small, medium, and large? So it's an issue everywhere. Perfect.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
Very good. Are there any other questions for Kylie? If not, is Amanda St. Pierre? Good morning.
Okay. I have internet, but Zoom tends to be difficult. So Brett and I are, you know, on those either parts of the state, Senator, that struggle with our telecommunications.
Well, you're looking good, so we can see you.
Thank you. So for the record, my name is Amanda St. Pierre. I farm at Pleasant Valley Farms with my husband and my 2 sons and their wives on our dairy. Newly transitioning to the next generation, which is very exciting. We've been farming since 1986 on our own. My husband grew up on his parents' dairy right on the Canadian border. They were immigrants to this country in 58, 59. So, and I'm a 8th generation Vermonter with roots back to Governor Gates. So the ongoing debate is I'm a Jersey girl and my husband is a Holstein guy. And right now the number is not proportionate the way it should be. We have more Holsteins than Jerseys, but we're growing. My herd is growing. So I've been listening to the testimony and it's very, I don't know, it's enthusiastic and it's exciting to hear from my fellow dairymen and women on some ideas that we talk about, but it's never usually in such a formal setting. So I appreciate the opportunity before this committee to share some thoughts, and I don't want to be redundant with what they've already said. But a little bit of the things that I'm hearing, if we're talking about the feed storage situation, I would just add that an economic value that sometimes is not put on dairies is shrinkage. And I don't think Heather and Kylie kind of brought that up, kind of in the fact that there would be spoiled feed if they're not in the appropriate bunks and being used appropriately. But shrinkage is a big number for the bottom line of dairy farms of all size, because you've spent all the money to put it up and grow it, and then if you're not using it, it's a loss. So just when you're having those discussions around feed centers and feed systems, shrinkage is a real number, and there's a dollar fee associated with it. A couple other things I wanted to talk about today. You know, this state does a great job, excuse me, preserving farmland, and Land Trust certainly has preserved many, many, many acres of land that's intended to be used for agriculture, working landscape, if you will. And so it's a concern sometimes that we've invested so much money into the land, but we haven't figured out a mechanism to vest in the farms that work the land. And I think that's kind of what you guys are being tasked with. One of the things I've always thought could be helpful, and I don't know how to develop it or, you know, invest in it, is each farm is so different. And I think you brought up the gap. Somebody brought up the gap to be economically viable between the cost of production and the price we're paid. And I was thinking about that, and it's such a hard number to give, because each of our farms are in a different place, whether we're transitioning or we've been farming forever, we have low debt, or we have high debt because we are just, you know, growing, or what the situation is. But, you know, there are thousands and millions of dollars that you guys have invested, and it'd be interesting to have a pilot project where you take a group of professionals, farms could apply, and they bring a team out, and the farmer identifies what they think the top 5 issues they're struggling with on their farm to be economically viable. Because farmers, the thing about farmers is that you invest in them and they're going to turn their profit right back into the dairy farm. And that's either our passion or it's our demise, because we just keep investing back in our dairy farms. So if we had a team of professionals like a Heather Darby and a financial person and, you know, different parts of the wheel, if you will, come to the dairies and sit down with us, and we identify what we think the top 5 issues are and come up with a plan on implementation, I think those farms are going to shift the page into becoming more economically viable. So on our farm, it could be, for instance, we, on the environmental side, we recertify our manure pits and our silage leachates, and we're doing that all on our own cost, because to get an engineer from the ag agency, they're very overbooked, and the funding hasn't really been there lately. So we just take that cost on ourselves. So in any given year, that could be, it's about 10 to 15,000 a pit that we have to recertify. And then if we have to do improvements, it's even more than that. So on our farm, it could be up to 100 or 150,000 a year just for recertifications and improvements to constructing a new manure pit, which if you're waiting for NRCS funding, you're years out, or you take on the cost yourself. But if we had a committee that came to our farm and identified these issues ahead of time and helped us navigate the grant process, helped us navigate different tools that might be available to us that we may not be aware of, you know, that could be a lift. And I certainly think of medium to smaller farms that are challenged with understanding the grant process, challenged with just, finding the time and resources to navigate some of these things they know that need to be done on their farm. They just don't feel like they're equipped to handle it themselves. So that was just one thought I had. The other thought I had was,
Amanda, I got to check this out a little more, but we did set a program up, farm viability, through VHCB. And I don't know how that would tie into what you were just suggesting, but they're supposedly, they contract out with a variety of, if a farmer calls in, they hire, these professionals like from the extension or from the lending institutions, cropping people to go out and view the farm but I don't know if it's in the same light. So I think, eventually before we get going really good in the legislature, I should have a more in-depth visit maybe with you on legislation for something like that.
yeah, just because each farm, and Heather can attest, each farm and each farm management is so different.
Yeah.
And that's what makes us unique. And we, I keep coming back to, there's been so much money invested in our working landscape. We want to keep it working. And, we are excited about the future. We're excited about the potential to grow local food for our local communities and for our state and for our region. And I think, if anything, COVID taught us how important we are. We do have some significant obstacles in our price we get paid over the costs that we incur here in the Northeast to produce. And environmental regulatory stuff is certainly part of that. And one of my comments I wrote down, and I think you've heard me testify, is that we really need to make sure that when regulations are developed, that they're tied to science. And I think that increases the cost. And I don't think there's a farmer that would object to a regulation being developed based on science, because we are the environmentalists. We are the ones protecting our land and water and air, and we want to do that. So we need the research, we need the science. Quite frankly, we need you folks making sure that your intent is followed out when it gets to the agency. And we need to look at the fee structures of different permitting, that's being offered out there, to help farmers comply, help farmers continue to be innovative. I think I'm going to talk a little bit, just briefly. One of the things we're doing on our farm is we're navigating the switch from producing electricity to natural gas with our digester, and expanding our current system, updating it, if you will, and then it's going to be hopefully used for natural gas rather than electric generation. We're working through the permitting processes now. And so I do feel that there's a lot of potential for this for our dairy industry, but it's going to involve help through the regulatory process. It's going to require some collaborative efforts on a multiple fronts for other dairy farmers to maybe look at this and maybe construct a digester if they don't have one already. I feel hopeful that there's going to be even more efficiencies out there for farmers that can support the efforts of the state, but that's going to take funding, unfortunately or fortunately, or it's going to take funding that you guys have already offered, but like redirecting it. And so I guess for me, one of the things I think would be interesting is a current inventory of the programs that are currently offered and the funding status of them. And it speaks a little bit to what Kylie is saying, is sometimes, a farm might have a really good project, but they just can't get it to fit any one mold. And again, what we do here on the dairy is going to be put back in our local economy. And I can't stress that enough, because I feel like there may be an interpretation that our industry somehow is a dead end industry. And we've been working really hard to show that it's not. It's an industry full of promise, innovators, and, environmentally responsible people who are cultivating new growing practices and new techniques, sometimes even new equipment to do that. And so one of the other things that we were excited and hope to see is new markets for our practices. And I think that was something Heather and her team were working on. And that could offset some of the environmental costs that we incur that go to our bottom line. I wanted to talk a little bit about pricing our milk and the overbase, underbase situation that we find ourselves in, both Agrimark and DFA. And we were hopeful that it would help increase the price of milk. Our price of milk has risen, but so have our cost of production. So it's hard for me to sit here as a dairy farmer and say that mechanism has helped that situation. I think it's too soon to know. But the cost of fuel is a huge one, and any kind of a tax relief benefit we could get. Steve testified on that a little bit earlier, the tax we're being charged to offset that fuel and save on transportation costs, because I think that's a big one right now that we're feeling, from getting our feed in off the fields to hauling our milk. It continues to be a struggle, and just the geographical makeup of our state and where farms are located makes it hard. And investment into processing continues to be a high priority in the state. The more innovative facilities we can have, the better it will be for our economy, quite frankly, and our dairy farmers. I don't know as I'm adding anything new, so I think I just would rather open it up to questions, because so many people said so many great things, and I concur. I concur with most of them. So
yeah, Amanda, the base and the over base, someone testified earlier that if you ship milk that's over your base, you don't usually find out what you're going to get for that long after you've already shipped it. And so how do you determine whether it's a good deal or a no deal if you ship over your base?
yeah, so I mean, it all comes down to what it cost us to make that milk. And if we're selling it for a little bit over what we're making it for in the long run, you got to take your whole milk production in total and average it out. But you're right, the signal to me is coming too late. You need to see it ahead of time to make decisions on your dairy on what you're going to produce. You can't stop a cow on a dime. This is a struggle. And quite frankly, I mean, they're still using the milk at a discounted price, Senator.
And what kind of a reporting system do you as a farmer get from whoever you sell your milk to, the actual price that they're really selling it for? How do you know what they're really selling it for?
Yeah, we don't get what they're really selling it for. We get what they pay us for.
How do you sell something? That doesn't sound like a very good deal to me.
We're very smart people, but this is the industry of which we participate in. And it's, Senator and Mr. Smith certainly have been dealing with this for a long time. And we're the only industry that does that. We're the only industry that sells something without explaining or setting a price. And it's a conflict, and I have to be cautious. in my comments, there's not a lot of co-ops left here in the state. And it's a sensitive issue to the dairy farmer, to be quite frank. We want to see investment from all the co-ops here in our state of Vermont. We'd like to see increased co-ops around the region, certainly. And, you know, unfortunately, I think it's at a federal level that has to be dealt with. And I think, gosh, we miss Bob Wellington, don't we? We miss him. But
Yeah.
we need some of that leadership. We need some of that direction.
No, yeah, it certainly, I've been in business all my life, and I'd hate to ship somebody something and not know until after the fact what I was going to get for it. I might keep it at home and put it in the manure pit or something. But you don't know. But I should think there would be a way that, you elect board of directors to work on your behalf, and you would think they would be working on the farmer's behalf as much as on the administration and the other guys have. But anyways, do you, a little bit back, we had where one of the co-ops was taking out money on a marketing basis to help marketing. Do you guys get a special fee assessed to you? I think you said you go to DFA.
Yeah, we do.
Do you get a marketing fee of some type or some co-op fee charged to you to help the co-op?
Yes. Yep. We get a lot of fees to help the co-op, and some I can understand as we, buy processing facilities and they need upgrades, and that's part of being an owner. But we do get charged a marketing fee, and milk moves in many different ways, as you know, and it doesn't always make sense to the farmer. There's some transportation restrictions on farms from transporting their own product, which could be a savings for some farms. I don't know as we'd want to do it because it's a whole other business, Senator Starr, as you know, but there are a few farmers that do it, but I don't know as it's open to any farm that wants to do it, and that comes with its own set of consequences. But it's just a very tricky road to travel. They do, in fairness, buy all of your milk. So they're going to take whatever the dairy farmer makes. But we felt this over base charge was going to, I don't know, we just thought it was going to be handled a little bit differently. And on our dairy, we have to sit down and evaluate. It was stronger during COVID. Due to the market demands, it's weakened a little bit. I think Agrimart has a much stronger program. I don't know how they feel about how it's working. But in the end, we have people who are hungry in our region. We have kids going to bed hungry. We have a serious world poverty issue facing us. Hunger being one of the biggest concerns by the United Nations. And so to me, it's like any food we can produce is needed and valued and should be treated as such, not to be discarded without careful consideration. And so it's a much bigger discussion. I think that Vermont dairy farmers are going to play a huge part in the future for food production from what we're hearing from scientists. And we want to be ready for that. And so some of what we need to be ready for is controlling our costs. And I think Kylie touched upon something interesting with the power costs. I think that was a very intriguing idea. And I think, any investment you make into Efficiency Vermont on dairy farms helps all of us as well. So that would be another area to help us look at our cost of production.
One more quick question. Have you ever been paid for the over-base milk that you sent? Have you ever been paid more than the federal order payment or for the regular milk? Have you ever, I mean, it sounds like it's always been less for that
Yes.
the base milk, but you know, if you were selling on the spot market and somebody was short and you made a little extra, do you ever get above the base?
No,
No.
no.
Hmm.
From everything I'm hearing, you know, they talk a lot about value added,
Yep.
you know, value added, you know,
Yeah,
value added.
20 years on that and finally rolled it over, but the trickle down economics of that hasn't worked too well.
Yeah. And I mean, I think we're still struggling. I think individual farms are doing some really neat things and trying to get their specialty products out there, and they're making cheeses and yogurts and doing all kinds of things. But at the end of the day, I think that has to be more on, you know, the co-ops who are processing the fluid milk. And I think that would be an interesting conversation maybe to talk to the co-ops and see what they're doing to create a value added product. It'd be interesting to hear what their ideas are and how they're going to make that happen.
Well, we're going to have them on at our next meeting, and if any of you want to sit in, you're always more than welcome to listen. Jackie has a question, I believe.
Yes, thank you, Bobby. Hey, Amanda, it's good to see you.
Hi.
Thanks for coming in. You mentioned Efficiency Vermont, and that's been a particular concern of mine for a long time because I don't think they're working with the farmers very much. I don't think that there's a lot of access for you all. How have you worked with them, and have they helped with your methane digester, and what else have they helped with on the farm? And do you have any thoughts of what more they could do?
Yeah, no, thank you, Jackie. And you know, it's weird because the only way we hear about them is half in chance. Oh, there's this program out. It's never like in front of me so I can say, hey, let's look at this area, look at that area. And I think that would be a great value for the money and the time for Vermonters, quite frankly, you know, because we're going to be doing this on behalf of everybody. But they are not, have not helped in our digester project. But, you know, we are, yeah, I mean, we want to invest in more efficient fans, more efficient lighting, you know, on our existing dairies. And it's up to the individual farmer to go out and try to dig through the weeds to find these programs. I don't know. I would like to see better communications, and I would like to see more resources, and they probably need more staff, but I think that's an area that could really make a difference on all size farms.
Well, I'm a little concerned. I don't think they need more staff because I think if you look at your electric bill and all the farms look at the electric bill and the money that's going to them, I don't think we're getting the investment back from agriculture that you're putting into that program. So that's one of the things that I would really like to try to figure out how to win back or make them invest more equal to what you're spending. Because, you know, one of the things that's just come up is I think it's Global Foundries is just asked to become their own utility. And I've asked the question, why can't large farms do that? Because if you're producing your electricity, why shouldn't you be allowed to do the same thing and to get the tax break? I think they're getting tax breaks. So Senator Starr, I see Dan is gone, but I wish that would be one of the things that we look at going forward and try to make Efficiency Vermont recognize the amount of investments that the dairy farms are doing on their own and trying to access some of the money that they've been putting into that every month on their electric bill that they're not getting anything back on. So thanks, Amanda, for that.
I appreciate that. I agree.
Yeah. Any other questions for Amanda?
I've got one.
Yeah, Randy.
Hi, Amanda.
Hi, Senator.
Just a question. There's a thread that I've been hearing through a lot of testimony, both today and elsewhere, is the issue of transparency, and particularly transparency in terms of what farmers get through the process of dealing with processors and others. Do you feel that you have all the financial information that you ought to have about this process? And if not, what do you think you should get and from whom?
You're putting me on the spot, Senator. But I understand the question. So I'm gonna first say that I've been actively involved probably since 2006. Up until then, I was really raising my children and I wasn't as involved with my cooperative. But I feel like that there are sometimes restrictions placed on information we may want for competitive reasons with other cooperatives. I haven't lately asked for certain information that I've been turned down, but I certainly am going to say that there's sensitivity around the dairy industry in the fact that we have two cooperatives and we want to get along with who provide us a mechanism of selling our milk. And yeah, I don't know how else to answer that. I appreciate very much, and I have been on the record of saying this, that my cooperative did come in and invest locally in our community in St. Albans Co-op, and they've expanded the plant and they've invested serious money in there. But do I think the farmers have a clear line of transparency across the board? No, I do not. And, you know, I'm sure there probably are reasons for that, but I think there could be more information shared.
Well, one of the things I've noticed, for example, is that that DFA, if you go to their website, has a lot of summary information about their financial results for the prior year, but I don't see any audited financial statements. Are those made available to the members? The co-op's audited financial statements?
I don't know if I'm the right one to ask. You could ask, I know Harold Horrigan is on the board, but I mean, I do see their financial statements. At the end of the year, they do send out their book and the meeting minutes and the resolutions. But I can't honestly say right now if they were the audited version, Senator.
Okay.
I would hope they were the I hope that to be true. But I've never been a board member, so you know, obviously the board members are shared a lot more information.
Mm-hmm.
But I would think that would be a great question to ask them. And I guess for me, for a representative of the dairy industry, I really would like to see some security in our milk markets. And I would like to see, you know, yeah, I would just like to see some security and maybe reinvestment in the dairy farms that are here and are just trying to move ahead.
Thank you.
If I may, Amanda, did you get better reporting results, if you remember, from when it was St. Albans Co-op than you do now, or do you have an opinion on that?
So I was not a St. Albans board or St. Albans cooperative member. We were Eastern MMI, and then we got bought by DFA, so we went through a transition that way. So I can't say, but I mean, you know, there's something nice having a local co-op. There's just some pride you get. I don't know if you can equate that into funding, but you know, we're trying to make DFA welcome here. I'm excited that they're here in my community because I do feel like, okay, there's a plant. I can see, you know, my dollars really at work right here in front of me, provides jobs to my community. So that excites me. But I would like to see more of that. I would like to see more investment from DFA in our energy transition. I would love to see that. There's, you know, Franklin County has a lot of dairy farms. Vermont certainly has a lot of DFA dairy farms. And I would like to see some more investment in our local area from our cooperative.
Thank you. Kylie?
I think maybe if I can just piggyback onto what Amanda was saying, we do get access to the financial statements. But remember, DFA is such a big company now that we're looking at national numbers that are not necessarily relating back to our over base production numbers. And so I think that is a piece that we don't we don't fully understand as a producer. So it's certainly not a lack of information. It's just like how that trickles down to our milk check that we don't always fully understand.
In talking about base, during the pandemic, when schools are closed, hot lunch programs are, I guess, not functioning well. Has that base been increased or decreased in the last 6 months?
Yeah, we're at 92% right now, and we were at 88.
Yeah.
So we have seen that increase, which certainly gives us less of a deduct in our milk check if we're producing over base milk.
So it changed 4%, and is that for the entire co-op?
Yeah, when they make those adjustments, it's equitable to all producers.
Yeah, good.
In our region.
Yes, good point. So different regions of DFA have different styles of base programs.
So what about New York? Because
New York is our region.
Pardon?
New York is our region.
Oh, in the order, you mean? The federal order.
So DFA manages the Northeast as one program, but the Midwest may have a different program. The Far West has a different program. So it's really based on each region of DFA.
Yeah. And so you go all the way out to the next federal order, all of federal order, our federal orders all use the same then.
Amanda, do you know if the DFA boundaries are equal to the federal orders? I don't really know that.
I'm not sure that that's true, Senator. I think it is not. I don't think it's the same. But I can't say for sure, but I don't think it's the same. The region is different than the federal order, I believe.
I think so too.
Yeah.
Well, that raises a question mark. If you're all using, the same balancing plant and competing for the same market, you'd think that the same federal order and the base plan would match up together. But anyway, we'll ask that question when they come in to testify. Thank you.
I think it's good to remember, though, milk moves in such a dynamic way that those boundaries might be made based on efficiency. So just keep that as a thought, not so much like solid walls around different areas.
Yeah, that's a good thought. Any other questions for Amanda? If not, I believe Will Gladstone, are you on?
I am. Good morning.
Morning.
Thank you.
Good to have you with us.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for inviting me. So my name's Will Gladstone. I farm with my two parents and my youngest brother in Bradford, Vermont, in the Connecticut River Valley. Farm started 35 years ago. And we sell our milk to Agrimark. We also grow about 250 acres of pumpkins, as well as a diversification. So a lot of the folks, I'm going to sound very repetitive to what most folks had said this morning. And I did write down some notes as we went. I think from our perspective, as an Agrimark member, you had asked a question earlier, Senator Starr, as far as how much base has been given back. With Agrimark, it's a very different picture. We were able to make slightly more milk production than DFA at times based on how the programs were administered, but there has been no additional base at this point given back to the members. And that largely has been in part due to still the cooperative feels like there is an overabundance of milk in the Northeast, in our region. And they're actually now, and I apologize based on what time I got on, maybe someone had already said this, there actually now is even a line item on our milk check that deals with milk losses as far as whether it was condensed or raw milk that was dumped for that month or sold at a significant loss. So I think that it's the two cooperatives very much right now, I think, are taking different approaches to deal with the oversupply of milk, or if they feel like there is an oversupply of milk for what they're doing for business at the moment. As far as how that pertains back to us and in our day-to-day functions, we feel like we've had a great year, but as everyone's mentioned, inputs continue to go crazy. I guess as far as ways to overcome and help put additional funds or help the dairy industry in Vermont, I look at us being in New England compared to the other New England states. I believe we are the only state in New England that does not have some type of funds in the form of a per hundredweight basis going back to their dairy farms. Massachusetts, Maine, Rhode Island, Connecticut have substantial amounts of money in the form of $1 or $2 per hundredweight going back to those producers. What a huge advantage. We're in a group of other dairymen that are from New York and New England, and we open up our financials and compare to one another's. You can tell the farms that are receiving that assistance based on how we analyze the milk checks and look at one another's milk checks. So that's a big deal. I don't know where that money would come from, but compared to our neighbors to the south or to the east, we definitely are not getting the assistance that they are. I think what Amanda said was really powerful as far as the digesters that are in our state. A lot of them, I assume, have contracts that are nearing the end or are at the end with GMP or the old CVPS. Natural gas, it seems like there's more and more people that are converting, whether it's in the West or the Midwest, digesters to natural gas, and having aid or support for those farms to make those switches, or for new digesters to even come online in our state and have the infrastructure that our state would need to have. There is not a lot of natural gas pipelines in our state, and I'm sure that's has been a hot button issue at different times, comparatively to other areas that are going to see this growth and farms utilizing digesters to make natural gas production. They're going to have an easier time of doing that based on proximity to natural gas pipelines. And these farms, and Amanda could speak to it better than I could. We do not have a digester on our farm, but they're going to see anywhere from a couple $100 or more possibly per cow per year of income. And that's a big deal. Could even be more. I guess I would piggyback on what everyone said as far as additional processing. And I say this really from our point of view, shipping our milk to Agrimark, the base program that Agrimark has at the moment, we do know what our penalty is going to be the month to come, and it has so much teeth in it to the form of $23, $24 a hundredweight. You do not want to overproduce as much as possible. There's by the time trucking and promotion comes out and the penalty, there's hardly no money to be made on that overbase milk. Whereas with DFA in recent months, that's been very different. So that's interesting to see the difference between the two. Someone had mentioned West Springfield. West Springfield, from an Agrimark member's perspective, and what management tells us, is at capacity or well above capacity, to the point that they can't even do maintenance the way that they should be able to do maintenance. So again, we need to continue to work as a state on having processing and trying to draw processors to the state of Vermont, whether it's through tax incentives, whatever that may be, to want to make it a friendly environment for processors to come in. I'm aware that there's a couple different plants right now in the state that they're not large plants, but they're not even being run right now at the moment. They're cheese plants that are sitting idle, and that's a shame for sure. I guess I go back to the base program and talking about if the state could at some point have a program like Maine or Connecticut and add dollars per hundredweight. When we're under a base program in our state and we can only, or with the cooperatives in our state, only produce a certain amount of milk, there is no way to decrease our costs easily. Typically farmers, right, wrong, or indifferent, one of the mechanisms to decrease their cost of production has been to make more hundredweights. In this environment, especially now with inflation, that is one of the best ways to decrease cost of production, or at least try to keep up with inflation. And at this moment, we're handcuffed. And that's a decision that the state can't affect, this committee can't affect, but I look at the reasons why we've gotten here. A lot of it has to do with not enough processing, not investing in the facilities that are in our state. Trying to think of other things that I'd written down here. I think the processing's big. The other part too, from an Agrimark member's perspective, and I'm sure with DFA it's the same, cost of transportation's huge. Diesel price is huge. The other thing that our hauler has really dealt with that has been tough, and seeing it across the country, I'm sure, is lack of drivers and lack of ease of getting a CDL nowadays. I don't know how to fix that, but that seems to be a huge issue. We definitely need more truck drivers in our state to make it so we can get these products moved. And the other part too, that this isn't as much on the ag side, but from hauling milk and from an expense side, is insurance and cost of insurance for those milk haulers has doubled, if not tripled. So those are some of the issues that we're seeing on our farm. I think the biggest take home for me would be the lack of processing. And when I say lack of competition, I think that's like Amanda and Kylie mentioned, it was often said two co-ops. Boy, that's not doing us any favors anymore. So that's what I would have to say.
Yeah, thank you, Will.
You're welcome.
I don't know if you were on earlier when we talked a little bit about, we had our legislative council person do a review of what it costs farmers to meet the environmental cost. And it added
Yeah.
up to $1 and what? He estimated $1.70 and but what intrigued me was the other New England states where we're all in the same federal order. Other New England states are getting, it's costing you and our Vermont farmers, say $1.78 above them to produce milk, and yet we don't send you a check in the mail, but like in Maine, they have some federal from state programs that are above the federal order.
Right.
And the other states, I don't know how they get the money, but of course they have a lot more people than we have, but they send their farmers, you testified that they send them, they have a milk reimbursement program of some type. So we'll have to look into that. Do you know what that is in any of the other states?
I don't know where the funds come from or what it would be called, but it's money, substantial money that is based on a per hundredweight basis. I've got there's a lot of Agrimark members, DFA members as well, obviously in Connecticut. I think that in recent years has been over $2 a hundredweight. And that's huge. I mean, that's huge. I mean, at the moment, and there's some things internally going on with Agrimark, and it's kind of a sidebar deal, but we're getting a full $1 a hundredweight taken out now, and I'm sure people have given testimony to that, just to make ends meet. And the last piece I would say to this is federal milk order reform needs to happen. It needs to happen for our order. And there's some pieces in it that speak to how barrel versus block pricing happens. And that has really hurt it's really hurt Agrimark for sure. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, there are questions for Will. Well, you didn't tell us, I don't think, you told us how many acres of pumpkins, but how many cows you're a large farm, right? And how many do you milk?
Yeah, we're a large farm. We milk 1,800 cows. Yep.
But we have certainly heard loud and clear that the issues of cost they just grow as the size of the farm grows. A small farm versus a big farm, everybody's costs have gone up tremendously. Other questions for Will? Randy, do you want to ask him your question? No?
No, not at this point. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for your time, Will.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and have a good day. So,
thank you as well.
So Brent, are you up?
Yeah, I'm up. But I came in here not more for regulation, but it's the same thing.
Yeah.
So I keep going to the same old, it's tough at the farm. I milk about 180 cows. I live in Craftsbury, me and my wife.
I just want to fix it so you can see.
I don't need to see me.
Can you turn it? So
I'll go back to the old broken record.
There we go. Well, we got you
We need to
right
get whole
on.
milk back in the schools. That'd be economic big time. It's been out 20 years. And I'm kind of worried about this new Global Warming Solutions Act. I'm already paying surcharges. That's fuel surcharges to my fuel company. My hauling company. And even for my custom operator, I had fuel surcharge. And that's just gonna be another fuel charge to me. And I'm now even worried about, this is looking down the road, what's gonna affect me more. We have a natural resources gonna do a overhead site on wetlands without even stepping foot. And that's an economic effect, that'll affect me. It'll devalue my farm if I see it, unless there's some kind of compensation. I hope that could be done. They're kind of coming in heavy-handed, I think. But I guess those are the main things I look at. It's tough. I don't know how much longer I have no legacy on my farm right now. My kids don't look like coming back, but I'm gonna keep going for a while. I couldn't do what I did starting today, what I did when I first started. It was a different atmosphere. So I'm kind of short to the point. I don't know if there's anything you want to ask me, but.
Well, how you ship to
I'm DFA member.
DFA, and so we've sat through this.
Yeah.
I'm glad you came in. And DFA and Agrimark has two different type systems.
That's correct.
So you don't get one thing taken out of your check, but it adds up differently the way DFA does it, right? Yeah, I mean,
Yes.
you're on a base.
We're all on a base, but like you say, there's different the way the base is.
Yeah.
And my milk's going to Cabot most of the time. And look, we're talking about processing. They don't have the workers. They're hurting for workers. The guys tell me they even brought some, I think from somewheres, workers in from another country under the things, but they're only there 6 months. I said, we just got them trained. He said, yeah, we just got them trained. They had to head back.
Yeah. So the visas are an important issue I mean, something that we could talk to our federal delegation about and promote to get that for a longer period of time.
Get that whole milk.
Yep. And the whole milk issue.
Whole milk issue.
So you've noticed your costs have gone up tremendously, I take it?
Yeah, the price of milk was great, but everything else went up. It didn't really affect it as much as you thought you were gonna get. Fuel, fertilizer.
In regards to the wetland issue, I couldn't make the one in St. Johnsbury, but I made the one in Swanton. And, there was quite a few concerns raised and they did, I see posted for one additional hearing to help people out. But what they're doing is they're expanding out the footage, and if it tests like it's wetlands, they're expanding the size of the wetlands. But as far to this point, as far as being able to grow food or crops, you're still going to be exempt to utilize that. But I think it's something that us in the legislature are going to have to stay wide awake on.
That's open land probably. That means nothing.
When they come in. But
the issue of valuation of the property, which you raised, it would
Well,
conceivably have an effect.
Yeah, because it's gonna, what's my value? So if it's worth a lot, I should be compensated for, I think.
Yeah,
I'm making payments on I bought land and making payments on all of it. It's like,
you didn't deduct the wetland?
not yet.
Yeah. No, that Randy was at the meeting, and another guy that got elected will be from Franklin County was there along.
Senator Norris.
It was certainly the largest crowd of all their meetings that they had was in the Franklin County area. So are there any other questions for Brent? I guess you never told us how well you did this last year.
Well, I did.
Yeah, on the farm with the higher price of milk and did you break even this last?
Well,
year?
I made some, but I think I got to borrow a little bit of money this month. I bought a few pieces of equipment. I bought an outside furnace
Yeah, good.
because I figured if that fuel's gone up,
You burning oil in that outside furnace?
burning wood.
What about the DMC program? Did you?
They kicked in
Yeah.
last 2 months.
So you got signed up in that and for
And you
next?
think with the price of milk being that high, you would think it wouldn't
No.
kick in.
No, when we put that, it came from this committee.
Yeah, I know.
To the ag committee and we voided out and pushed it to the appropriations committee. But of course, we done that last year. I mean, early. And then the price of milk started going up, not. And I said, oh God, that's going to be, I'll get ribbed on that, throwing that money away. But it, not that it was good to hear that it was paying off, but in one sense, I was glad for my fellow legislators that at least it came back in and there was enough already to cover the total cost of that program. And they claim next month that it should kick in again September. And so I was glad to see that. So are there any other questions from the committee?
I tell you, I'm not a medium farm either. I'm a small farm. I was listed here as medium.
Well, I lowered the number.
Oh. Did I?
No, you said you milk.
180 about with dry cows.
Yeah, that's with the dry cows. Yeah. Well, thanks a lot for coming down and hopefully we'll get you some internet going by.
I just
your
gotta get
house.
mine set up better. I guess that's the way I am.
Yeah.
I'm old school.
The
I like to come see you guys face to face. It's easier for me.
Well, it's a good way. It's a good way to do business. And this is Linda Lehman, who keeps us quite straight.
Does everything.
Yeah. So, is there anything else that any committee members want to bring up? Hopefully, at our next meeting, we'll have the dairy processors in, and we'll try to work something else in with that because there's only the two. And then, and Ben and Jerry's and the yogurt plant, and hopefully we can get the four of them to all show up. And then we've got, so we'll have hopefully four people testifying, or if they want to bring two of them, for each one, they can. The date, we need to work on that, right?
The last meeting, you decided that the next meeting will be on the 5th of December.
You forgot.
The 5th of December.
So our, I don't know if you heard that, you should have, but December 5th is the date for our next meeting. Jackie, did you have a question with that?
No, I had a question about something else, but I think Representative Marcotte had his hand up before I did.
Oh, I didn't even see Michael's hand up. Michael.
Thanks, Jackie. Thanks, Bobby. Just, I guess, an observation, when we're talking about the environmental pieces to farming and the cost to farmers, I'm just wondering if we've ever done a return on investment. So there's a reason why we're having the farmers do what they do to try to protect the environment. We've been paying a lot of money to try to fix the problem? And are we starting to see any benefits of what the farmers are doing? Is it costing us less money now that we have to invest into trying to fix the issues that are going on out there? And so, I would think eventually that we would save money. And how do we get that money back to the farmers for what they're doing to try to protect the environment? And also, I guess I'd like to understand better the co-ops and the benefits that they're providing to their members, and how it used to be when they first started compared to where they are now. And I know that, going to just two co-ops in the state has been difficult, I think, or we're starting to see how difficult that's been to the members. But they should be providing some type of, there should be some benefits to the members. And I'd like to know what they are. I really don't know. I know they got a place to bring their, process their milk and things like that. But are there other benefits they're providing to the farmers? As far as educational and things like that, to help the farmers, with their daily process. So, it's, we're asking ourselves, what can we do? But what more can there be more
in-house
that they could do to help the farmers and to keep them going? So those are some of the things that I've been, as I listened this morning. And this has been a real education for me, because I really, we don't hear too much about farming and commerce, which we probably should. And but it's a whole different system than I think what we're used to listening to.
Yeah, and but those are all questions, I think, Michael, that you raised are all questions that we would expect, the 4 principal buyers here in Vermont. We have, the 2 co-ops plus the yogurt plant and Ben and Jerry's, and then we got Booth Brothers, and some smaller dairies scattered around the state. But the big ones are the manufacturers. You would think with less competition to buy milk, which there is a lot. I mean, we used to have, how many, Jackie, 6 or 7 co-ops, maybe when you came to Vermont.
Last century, is that what you're saying?
Well, we've lost, a lot of them have joined together, and so the numbers are down. You would think that you could possibly get a little better price for your product when you sell it to a milk handler or something. But those are all good questions, and hopefully we'll get those answered by the processors when they come in at our next meeting.
And I think another issue that was brought up was the need for more processing.
Yeah.
But I think we've been hearing right along, and we heard it last year with Cabot, that they need more employees to be able to process more, and they want to process more. They just can't do it. And I think that's one of the huge issues that we're facing, not just in Vermont, but throughout the country. You can't find truck drivers. You can't find, people to work in the plants. And how do we attract another processor in when we don't have the bodies to fill the jobs that they want to, that they need to have? So
one reason I'm glad you're on this committee is to this question I'm going to ask you. Has Cabot Agrimart or John Goldstein, any of them ever come in and asked for economic development money to help put in a cut and wrap facility at any of their plants? Or has DFA been in to request some time to get money to help with their processing?
Well, as far as requesting to the Agency of Commerce, I don't know. We'd have to ask Joan that question. But I know, they haven't come to my committee. They may have gone to House Ag, I don't know. But, I think that's something that we, I think, need to have more discussions on.
Well, I called them to ask them what we could do to help you. I'm looking for trouble. I call them, they come see us, tell us what you need. And my phone's been pretty quiet on that particular issue. But anyways, Jackie?
Well, I do know when we first moved to Cabot, they got a federal grant. I believe it was called a UDAG grant. They're no longer available. And that was a $2 million grant that helped put in their cut and wrap. And that money was paid back to the town of Cabot, which the town of Cabot has been using for various things over the years. I don't remember how we paid for the Middlebury plant when we bought it, but they have been searching things out. And I really appreciate Representative Marcotte's comments, because several of us have always said that agriculture in general, and dairy in particular, touches everything in the State House, but it's very seldom acknowledged. And to have you on and listening to this is just wonderful. The last thing I'll say, because I know we're running out of time, as that next letter goes out with the request to what we're asking the co-ops to respond to, I'm just going to reiterate that to please also send that to the committee so that we know what they've been asked and how they feel about it. And I think having them talk about whether the three solutions that we're looking at, the overorder premium, the fee for market handlers, and the fee for packaging, I think we should ask them to respond to that too, and just see if it's online with what the farmers have been saying. And I think they can also talk about the overorder premiums that all the states are getting. I believe Will was incorrect. I think New York does not have an overorder premium. I think it's Vermont and New York is what I've heard. So maybe since they are all over the New England area, maybe they can respond to that too and what they know about it. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks. And I don't think Will mentioned New York. He did talk about Rhode Island and Mass and Connecticut and Maine.
And of course, they have a lot fewer farmers than we do in all of those states. I mean, Rhode Island has what? Do they even have 10 left? 4? Yeah. It's down there, and Connecticut doesn't have a lot. And so, yeah, we have to keep that in mind too.
Yeah. But anyways, anything else that anyone wants to bring up for this morning? John?
Bobby, were we gonna devote part of the hearing to sort of the environmental side of things? Today when the FAP program came up, I never even heard of it, or the farm agronomic. It sounds like there could be, we could fund that times 10. I know Heather's been doing a lot of research on this, but it would be interesting to sort of think about how what we're doing here, we could think about that bigger picture too of, investing in Vermont soils. And so just in the face of climate change resilience, there's no downside if all our dairy farmers have better soil, because they're, you get better production on forages, et cetera. So I wondered, how that might dovetail with what we're doing here.
I think, John, not that we couldn't do that here, but this last year we put quite a lot of money into bolstering up the ecosystem services through the Agency of Ag, even though it wasn't in the program that, I don't believe it was in the program that Heather brought up, but, we could do that now that we know that you and I are going to be back if we get appointed to the ag committees, we can get our state people in and promote that and get some money for it.
Yep, that'd be great, because it seems if we could flip the RAPs and the TMDL requirements to more of a carrot than a stick, like, do this or else, but instead of like culturally, we said, let's invest in what you're doing on your farms. That would be a big improvement.
Yeah, thank you, John. Just put that on your to-do list. So I won't forget, I don't think, but if I do, I'll call you up. Anything else from any of the members? If not, thanks a lot. We went right through without a break today, and I'm glad that nobody pushed for a break, or we'd have made some people even later than we are. So thanks a lot. And the 5th of December's fine with everybody, I take it. And
Heather cannot come.
Pardon?
Heather cannot come.
Well, Heather has a problem with that date, but I guess
Oh, yeah.
everyone else can make it. Plus, I want to make sure we give the co-ops some lead time to get their remarks and all that together. So with that, we'll adjourn the meeting.